You won't get anything easy up there in the freezing north. Every inch, dollar, and dream is something you cling to. One of the greatest aspirations of all time belonged to Parker Schnabel, obtaining gold valued at $40 million in just one mining season. That was more than simply an ambitious number. That was daring. It was risky. He had no intention of finding gold. He was engrossed in mayhem. There was weight on every object at that mine site. It was expensive every step of the way, from making decisions to waiting for them to use up fuel. The majority of the time, the sole objective was straightforward: stay on top of things. Expectations were high and the season began with optimism. However, early signs of weakness emerged. Instead of focusing on making progress, the crew was rushing to maintain their buoyancy. The plant was wasting too much manpower just to maintain going. Turning it all off, Parker thought about the unthinkable. A single fact that was ignored lies behind such desperation. Timing is crucial in the mining industry, particularly in Yukon. Hard freezing occurs in this land. It will remain frozen until you prepare it months in advance. It is necessary to remove the top layer of overburdened, worthless dirt from the gold as soon as possible so that the sun may thaw the ground. Parker omitted an action. The elbow cut was a plot of land that belonged to him. Even though he was aware that it was the right thing to do and that it contained gold, he was unprepared. That error had now paralyzed their whole operation, and they were in the midst of a racing season. Everything was going according to plan. Since there is currently 12 feet of gravel that needs to be fogged, we are currently directing as many workers as possible towards these cuts in order to get them caught up and ready to go. Gold was being produced by the bridge cut. Careful preparations for next season were also underway in another region. Time, gas, and labor had been put into the plan for the long haul, but it was all about to fall apart. Everything ground to a standstill the second Parker noticed the elbow cut hadn't been stripped or thawed correctly. By demanding that the whole crew, along with all of the machinery and attention, be directed toward the elbow cut, he altered the course of the season. And disorder ensued as a result of that choice. We were unable to keep up with the logistics. Jobs have to be abandoned mid-process by teams. The timing was just incorrect for the heavy machines. Things that were originally scheduled to be done a few weeks from now are now at the very top of the priority list. Information was misunderstood. Things turned around. On top of that, the weather was impatient. Rapid removal of 2 feet of overburden was required. Soil that was worthless and stood between them and the gold that could be theirs. Then there's the pay dirt, which is as solid as concrete and won't budge even with heavy artillery. This was more than a little inconvenience. An absolute emergency has occurred. Time was running out. Shrinkage had begun at the window. The focus of the workers had to change from meticulous mining to pressing tragedies. However, brood work on its own would not suffice. Someone or something enormous, strong, and merciless had to be able to rip through time for them to find a solution. The 73-ton D10 dozer is used by office manager Nona Lovelace to rip through the permafrost. Step right up, D11 dozer. This wasn't merely another weapon that Parker could use. It was terrifying. One of the world's largest bulldozers, designed to rip through icy terrain with abrasive mechanical force. They had a chance to save the season if this could cut through the permafrost layer. However, there is a catch. A tremendous price was paid for it. The D11's fuel combustion process is airplane-like. It costs money to run the process every hour. And refueling wasn't the only thing at hand. Consider the upkeep and the potential danger. Bringing in a second one meant the crew had to run it non-stop. By most accounts, it was quite careless. The actual cost wasn't the gas, so Parker didn't bat an eye. It was the season, the time, and the gold that had slipped away. He cherished this machine. There was tremendous financial pressure, and the fear of failing was even more crippling. Parker had to face the music at this very time. The present was in Gardy because of a choice taken long ago. There was no turning back now. We had to dig deeper, spend more, and cross our fingers that the dirt would yield its riches. The dream may be saved or buried under the weight of impending doom depending on what happened next. The second D11 wasn't merely a machine turning on when it started up. It meant something. Now was not the time to be cautious. We were now moving at full speed. There should be zero tolerance for war on Earth. Mechanics squawked. Rippers made of steel sank into the cold Yukon soil like ancient armor's claws. No longer was this dirt. Cold, unyielding ice from an ancient glacier. Despite its formidable strength, the D11 froze at several points. That was the thickness of the permafrost. The sound of its grinding, moaning, and resisting per inch was audible. The blades would swish in response to unseen obstacles. Even before the ice cracked, you'd assume it would smash the machine in two. Nevertheless, they persisted. It was a precarious situation for the crew. Multiple long shifts became a haze. The gear was sliced by the cold winds. You could work in misery for longer hours in the sun, but it didn't warm you a bit. That was hit rock bottom, and even the smallest setback felt catastrophic. A dozer wasn't the only machine stopped by a broken hydraulic pipe. It put a halt to all forward momentum. Time was more than simply money on this site, and a packed ripper meant wasted hours. Even though no one spoke a word, the pressure was palpable. And lastly, advancement. 3 grueling days later, they had cleared out enough suitable terrain to start slowing down. Just a shot, not a victory just yet. There was no partying among the staff. No, not just yet. Their deliberate haste in transporting the paid earth to the facility conveyed a single message. Seize the opportunity now. The once mute Big Red now rumbled to life. The operations core was located there. They had come for the shiny metal, but what they really wanted was the machine that could transform their months of preparation, weeks of grueling work, and days of frozen rage into cash. With each scoop, the crew added more soil to the pile. A surge of water blasted through the facility, screens trembled, soul boxes ran, and suddenly there was silence. Rather than coming from automated systems, humans. Everyone was observing the moving muck closely for any indications. Those mysterious black sands, those little yellow dots that held immense significance. The stress was palpable. Silence fell. Totally silent. This whole thing would be for naught if this cut didn't pay off. The risk, the pressure, the energy, and the time would all be for naught. Next, we have gold. They arrived at 282.3 degrees for their initial elbow cut cleanup. In that same second, they had control of nearly $740,000 worth of Yukon treasure. Now the crew could take a deep breath. It meant that they had made it back to safety despite the error and the mayhem, according to Parker. This demonstrated that Parker's vision could still be accomplished despite its flaws and haste. It was at that instant that everything shifted. They were no longer merely surviving. Their lead was growing. The cleanup from the elbow cut was the one that set everything in motion. One that sparked the fires of hope in every weary muscle and doubt that had been building for weeks. Instantaneously, the vibe changed. A sense of hopelessness had dissipated. Instead, unfettered forward motion. They had finally stopped wondering if there was any gold for the entire season. They had laid eyes on it, touched it, and measured it. Now they had something worthwhile to pursue with all their remaining resources. It was irrelevant how exhausted the team was, or how chilly it had gotten in the mornings. Because gold provides a rush like no other, something had changed inside of them. A surge of faith that drives men to persevere in the face of fatigue, agony, cold ground, and mechanical agony. Yes, that is precisely what they accomplished. They were like a well-oiled machine. Loads of pay dirt were hauled from the elbow cut to Big Red by trucks that moved like clockwork. The relentless cycle of Big Red's processing of the gold-rich earth continued day and night. Everyone on board understood their part and the gravity of the situation. Plus, they were unstoppable after experiencing success. For the first time all season, everything was falling into place, and what had previously felt like desperation was now motivating. However, the majority of spectators are unaware of this secret. Power alone isn't enough for a project of this scale. Harmony is necessary. Having access to any equipment, fuel, and piece of land in the planet is at your fingertips. However, everything falls apart like dominoes if even a single truck experiences a flat tire, a single loader breaks down, or Big Red becomes clogged. This is more akin to ballet than strength training. To stay up with trucks, dozers must move quickly. Trucks must maintain a safe distance from the factory. In order for processing to continue while everyone else resets the cycle, the plant must run smoothly. Time is of the essence in this perpetual domino effect. What had been disorder earlier in the season had become something unique: harmonization of tones. It resounded. Although it was filthy, it had an attractive quality all its own. And the outcomes were clear. The second cleanup they did was far superior to the first. 3,82.4% of a gallon in only 7 days. We can't call that progress. Yeah, that's dominance. This was the moment of truth for Parker and his team. At that precise moment, a season that had been teetering on the brink of collapse now carried the potential for something momentous, and the dream began to feel genuine again. Beyond the pursuit of gold, their goals had expanded. They were drawing near to it. It had taken weeks of battling, but the ground had begun to yield. Dirt that had been frozen had thawed. AB buzzed through the wash plant. Thank you, crew. Mechanisms operating in synchronization. But as soon as everything started to click, the Yukon showed them who was truly boss. It was starting to ice again, the very land they had just battled to defrost, painfully inch by painful inch. Once a peaceful companion, the sun began to recede behind a cloud cover. And that wasn't the exclusive danger. Cumulus clouds began to form over the horizon. The mine site may become a muddy soup with just one rainstorm. All of their preparedness was able to consumed in one go. No longer was it a race against fellow miners, but rather against Mother Nature herself. Parker was the first to notice it was coming. Not a moment was to be lost. The pressure he applied to the crew was increasing. Not carelessly, but because it was necessary. It will end when the ground freezes over once more. No more gold, no more comebacks in the late season, and no second chances. Parker sensed they needed to find a way through the door before it banged shut permanently. It wasn't only that the days were growing shorter by this point. Somehow, they had vanished. The dawn wasn't quite upon us yet. The arrival of night came suddenly. Extreme cold set in. Fog hung in the sky. The temperature on every surface was frigid. There was absolutely no space for mistake. Not a moment to fumble or fail. It was time to start mining the cuts that still had the greatest gold. The impact of each error was magnified. A jam machine was more than simply an annoyance. Somewhere in the dirt were thousands of dollars. Parker was aware of their adversary. He was aware of the stakes. He instilled a sense of urgency in their every action. As a result, $5,425.04 per ounce of gold were the final figures. All of them shining, earned, and authentic. The total was an astounding $14 million, or more than $2,600 per ounce. I assure you, that was real. They had indisputable evidence that they had accomplished the seemingly impossible. Here is when things start to change in the plot. Well, that $40 million target. It seems like a one-season dream at first, a huge goal to strive for in one unattainable effort. However, there are additional layers and strategies at work in Parker Schnabel's mining empire. The amount wasn't tied to a single season. It was all a part of a bigger picture, a strategy to extract valuable resources from the earth over the period of 2 or 3 years. It has nothing to do with a lucky break. Season following season, they piled on the ounces until they achieved that lofty total. With that in mind, the $14 million they brought in this season was more than plenty. A new era began. In light of the severe obstacles, freezing errors, logistical mayhem, and high-stakes dangers, that haul 5,425.44 ounces crushed expectations. In reality, Parker was spot on. Despite what should have been a disastrous season, he managed to refocus, overcome setbacks, and make tremendous headway. The real triumph is in the significance of this haul for the broader context, even though the headlines may center on whether or not he reached that fabled $40 million. Parker jumped years ahead of his potential in just one season. Plus, he pulled it off when most people wouldn't have been able to. We won in more ways than one. It was a return that was golden in appearance. Then again, when high-stakes drama, millions of dollars, and television cameras are all combined, people begin to worry. As with any popular show, speculation will inevitably surround Gold Rush. Viewers are engrossed in the plot as much as the mining. Theorizing also begins to pop up when plot points are excessively flawless, pleasurable, and perfectly placed. Some rumors have been circulating for a while, and they all center on what fans refer to as producer gold. The idea that producers may step in if a crew is very close to meeting their main seasonal goal but falls short. Subtly, just enough to propel the story to its climax, nothing so that it drastically alters the plot. Perhaps some additional fluids, or perhaps a choreography that occurs to be recorded at a later time. To give the audience the dramatic victory moment they're expecting for, maybe some support behind the scenes. I can see why the hypothesis would be accepted when the goal is to appease millions of viewers and conclude a season with a carefully crafted storyline of downfall, tribulation, and eventual salvation. The unsaid strain of reality TV, with its incessant demands for climaxes, hero moments, and that final gold count that sends shivers down viewers' spines, goes unspoken. It appears in forums, but no one has ever confirmed it. In that particular season, did the ground actually produce that much gold? On the other hand, was it the editing room's doing? No one is aware.